Welcome to our weekly roundup of what's going on Parliament Hill. It's something new we are trying. I am Nate Erskine-Smith. I am the Member of Parliament for Beaches, East York. I'm also the host of a podcast at uncommons.ca. And this is our first weekly roundup. And of course, the most important issue that is dominating Parliament Hill is foreign interference. Aaron Wary, a CBC writer, has said, quoting members of Parliament from all parties actually, that a cloud of suspicion hangs over Parliament. For my part, I've said we need accountability. Of course, we need accountability for anyone who has worked against our national interest. Now, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, in their recent report, they noted a very concerning case of a then Member of Parliament, past Member of Parliament, who was in a relationship with a foreign agent and actively shared confidential information with a foreign agent. So obviously, there should be accountability and consequences for conduct like that. Now, we don't have any understanding of details or anything else of allegations related to any other parliamentarians sitting or otherwise. It is irresponsible to call for names to be released without due diligence. So we need accountability, we need due diligence, and of course we need to ensure that intelligence sources are protected as needed. Now, unanimously and rightly, parliamentarians, we've kicked it over to the Foreign Interference Commission. We actually just passed foreign interference legislation as well this week unanimously. That's important too. Elizabeth May, who reviewed the report, she told reporters, "I am very comfortable sitting with my colleagues. That gives me comfort too. But we need all leaders to review the report and to put politics aside on such a serious issue." So, why won't Pierre Poilievre read the report? Why is he so afraid of a security clearance? Next up, NDP motions on big grocers. And I want to emphasize here, motions, plural, because I got some feedback from constituents who said, why didn't you vote for price caps and taxing big grocers? Well, there were two separate motions, and I voted against price caps because that motion on price caps came with no indication of how they would work. They generally don't. Came with no indication that they are a tool of last resort, which they are, and no indication that food inflation has come down recently, which it has. Now, the second motion, which I did support, the government didn't, but I did, it called for excess profits taxes on big grocers' profits. And this idea of excess profits taxation is actually really important. We've seen it historically used where you've seen profits in emergency settings. And when we saw record profits from big grocers in the course of the pandemic, of course, excess profits taxation should be part of a serious debate in Parliament. Next up, it is not often that our podcast, the Uncommons podcast, receives the media coverage that it did last week, national media coverage, when I was joined by Arnold Viersen, the social conservative MP from a riding in Alberta. Now, we spoke actually, for the most part, about our shared work together on committee to address the exploitation of people on porn platforms. I also asked some questions, and so much of the attention actually focused on his answers to those questions around abortion and gay marriage. For my part, I thought that the most interesting answer was when he said it wasn't a lonely fight, that there are more social conservatives in that caucus than many people, certainly myself included, might appreciate. Now, interestingly, Pierre Poilievre, he comes out with a swift and I think overall a strong response. But let's not forget that he was previously endorsed by the Campaign Life Coalition until he realized it wouldn't help him to get elected. Next up, pandemic prevention and preparedness. Now, this is a fairly rare occasion too, but private members can introduce they can introduce unlimited bills. They only get to debate one bill in any given parliament. Now, my bill, Bill C-293, the Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness Act, passed the House of Commons last week and is now headed to the Senate. Here's what it does real simply. It ensures that the government tables in Parliament and updates a report in Parliament on a regular basis, a pandemic prevention and preparedness plan, accountability to Parliament and to the public that the government is taking best efforts to reduce pandemic risks and to prepare us for the next pandemic. After SARS, we did not take as much action as we should have. We were not as prepared for the COVID pandemic as we should have been. Now, people should know, and conservatives should especially know, no global cooperation to reduce pandemic risk and prepare for the next pandemic. That does not mean we are giving up our sovereignty. Sorry, Leslie Lewis. And a One Health approach doesn't mean that everyone is going to be eating bugs. And sorry, Cheryl, bugs aren't vegan to begin with. That internet conspiracies have found their way into conservative MP speeches should worry us all. Now, the next step, wacko, and this is drug policies, but wacko has also made its way into conservative speeches, and especially the speeches of the leader of the official opposition. He throws out the word wacko to describe wacko liberal drug policies. Well, you should know that decriminalization, harm reduction, safer supply, and expanded treatment, they are all part of a comprehensive and serious public health response to a really, really devastating crisis. And you should also know that they are supported by the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, Health Canada's expert task force on substance use, the Canadian Mental Health Association, medical health officers across this country, and families who have lost loved ones to this crisis. What is wacko? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, and that's prohibition and the war on drugs. Next up, and this is the biggest fight, I think, to come in Parliament, capital gains taxation. And I want to ask you, do you care about tax fairness? Do you care about wealth inequality? Because if you do, you should also care about the capital gains tax measures that are being proposed. They ensure that investment income, passive investment income in the stock market, that is treated the same. It isn't treated more favorably than your hard-earned employment income. They should be treated the same. A buck is a buck is a buck. Poilievre, of course, he comes out swinging against the changes. Of course he does. And so let's be clear. On $1 million in gain, in pure profits, that's after the cost of buying a piece of property, that's after capital improvements to the property, that's after the costs associated with the sale of a property, on $1 million in gain. That's before you take advantage of any spousal combination of the $250,000 limit. That's before we even talk about the capital gains reserve, which you should know about. But you'd be looking at about $40,000 in new federal taxes. Now, if you're transferring, say, a cottage, and it's been in the family forever, and you're transferring it to your kids, there's a pretty straightforward way to avoid new taxes by combining that exemption threshold with a spouse, but especially taking advantage of the capital gains reserve. If you want to learn more about that, email me. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to answer questions. Email me at info@beynate.ca. And closing here, we're going to keep that email up because what I want from you, I want you to let us know what you think. If there are topics or questions that you want me to cover in our next weekly roundup. And I will leave you with my favorite part of the debate on my own pandemic preparedness bill from one of the longest serving MPs in the House of Commons, and I couldn't help. I gave this a standing ovation.
Thankfully, I've not been forced to attend a Marxist re-education program yet. Alternative protein is just a far-left dog whistle that means crickets. What is it with the far left and their desire to have us all eat bugs?